All right, guys, so last week we showed you guys how we degrip and prep skateboards and glue them together. So this week we're gonna show you guys how we mill them. So the very first steps is to take the skateboards out of the press. So come on. Shout out Harvey. Once you have your stack of skateboards, you basically have a log of skateboards. There's no flat sides on any side, and it's super thick and super heavy. So now we have to mill it, which is where we come to our Laguna 18BX bandsaw, and we start that process. So the very first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna rip this entire stack this way, and we'll have somewhat of a flat side to reference for cutting the next side. So right now we're gonna put a line, which is what we do with blue tape. I've learned that it's just an easier reference point than drawing the line because you have no straight line as a reference. So we're out of blue tape. We have more blue tape. All right, so we come and we just want to go right inside the edge of the skateboards to where it's going to be on the edge of all of them. Okay, so that's good, straight line. And then we make sure the height of our bandsaw blade is appropriate, which it is, and let's get it. All right, so we cut off the side, and now we have a relatively flat side that we can turn the block on its side, and we're gonna cut the top, most of the top board off. And then from there, we'll have two square reference points that we can begin making blocks. So again, I just reused the piece of blue tape that we had on the top. I turn it around since the other side was completely straight. And I just go where I know I'm gonna clear the concavity of the first skateboard, because that's the issue at hand. If you look, the way skateboards are made, they're curved this way. So we have to cut past that curve to get a straight block. So that's what we're doing right now. Let's get it. Now we've got a block of skateboards that has two relatively flat sides. Okay, so the next step is we're gonna take this block and we're gonna cut it into two pieces because this piece is too thick to fit through my drum sander, which is how we flatten the top and bottom. So let's do that. We're gonna measure the thickness of this, and we're basically gonna cut it right in half. So we got a little less than half because we have to account for the saw curve. And then we're gonna flip this over and cut it. So 2 5/8 is a little less than half the block. That should account for the saw curve. So we're gonna take our block of skateboards, we're gonna flip it with the flat side facing the fence and the other flat side on the table. And then we're gonna repeat this twice. So now that we've degripped our boards, glued our boards, and began the milling process, now we have to, these are both rough because the bandsaw, you can't get, it's really hard to get like completely square. So we need to get them sanded like these guys, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run them through our Supermax drum sander. And then from there, we'll go to the joiner, and then to the chop saw, and then to the table saw. So let's get it. So now we've got our pieces drum sanded, so we have a flat piece on the top and the bottom. So we're ready to cut it, but before we do that, we need to have a completely straight edge. And this is mostly straight from the bandsaw, but now we're gonna come over to the joiner and get it perfectly straight. And then after that, we'll cut these curves off with our chop saw, and then we'll have basically a block of wood that we can make into veneers or components or whatever we wanna make. We'll have a dimensional piece of lumber. So let's join it real quick. All right, so now when we look at these pieces, all the way across on at least the top or the bottom, you see it's straight. Okay, there's a few bandsaw marks here still, but all we really need is either the top or the bottom to be straight. So whenever we press it against the chop saw's fence, there's no gaps and we get a perfectly square cut. So these are ready for the chop saw, so let's go over there. So we're gonna take our piece, we're gonna come over to the chop saw, and we're just gonna line it up to where we're cutting all the round stuff off so we can have a square stock. So now we have two flat pieces that are square, and these pieces are going to be made into a guitar blank, which is, we're just basically making a big rectangle of skateboards. So now we're going to rip these pieces into the thickness of the guitar blank, which is going to be 1.75 inches. So we'll take these, we'll rip them into 1.75 inches, and then we'll do a glue up, and then it'll be ready for flattening and the CNC. So it'll pretty much be at the end of its life cycle in our shop. So let's get it. All of our pieces milled. So this is gonna be a guitar blank for Richard. You know who you are, shout out Richard. So now it's time to glue them. So we've gotten our pattern like we want, and we got our Rockwood parallel clamps, and now we're gonna flip these over and use some Tight Bond 3 and glue these up. And once this is a solid block, we'll run it through the drum sander and we'll trim the edges to make it nice and square all around, and then we'll ship it to the customer so he can have his brand new guitar from Recycled Skateboards CNC'd at his local shop. So let's get it. Shout out Richard. Pretty good. All right, so this is what we ended up with. We started with some raw stacks of skateboards, and now we have a glue up for a guitar blank for a custom order. So once this is dry and cured, we'll take this out of the clamps, we'll run it through the drum sander a few times just to make sure everything is level on both sides. And then we'll straight line each edge and get it sized up, and then we'll ship it off. So this is a good explanation of how to mill skateboards. This is the best process that I know with the tools that I have at my availability. So I hope you got something from it. Thank you guys, and tune in next week.